Alright, come here for a second, because tonight isn't just another Mandela Effect episode where we list examples and move on. This one's the question that sits underneath it all, the one that keeps tapping you on the shoulder after the video ends. When did the timeline change? And I don't mean when did people start noticing logos look different. I mean, when did reality stop matching the version of events that so many of us remember actually living through? Because if you've ever had one of those proper Mandela effects hit you, not the "oh, that's interesting" kind, I'm talking the kind that makes you pause and feel your stomach drop, then you already know what I mean. You see something you've known your whole life and suddenly it doesn't look unfamiliar. It looks wrong. Like you're looking at a clean copy of something you grew up with, but it's not your original. And the weirdest part is this: the more you talk to people about it, the more you realize it's not just about details. A lot of people feel the whole world itself changed, like the atmosphere of life shifted, like time sped up, like things just got louder, harsher, more chaotic, and somehow less human. So tonight we're going to do something different. We're going to try and trace the shift. Not with lab equipment, not with a perfect answer, but by following the one thing this phenomenon gives us over and over again: patterns. Because whatever you believe in, timeline shifts, parallel realities, simulation resets, whatever your framework is, the Mandela Effect behaves like a clue trail. And if enough people are remembering the same thing differently, it means we're not dealing with random noise. It means there's a signal. And just so we're clear, before we go any further, I'm not approaching this like humans have bad memory. I don't buy that. Not when people across the world remember the same spelling, the same quote, the same logo shape, without ever meeting each other. Not when the details are that specific and the confidence behind them is that strong. To me, this feels like continuity. Like some of us are holding memories from a slightly different version of events, and the version we're in now doesn't match. So the question becomes, if reality shifted, even slightly, when did it happen? Because if we can narrow down the when, we get closer to the why. I'm going to walk you through the time windows people report most often, the years that come up again and again when you ask, when did it start feeling off? And I want you to listen for your own answer as we go, because almost everyone who believes in this has a line in the sand, a moment where they look back and go, yeah, that's when it started. And by the end of this, I want you to know yours. Not because we're trying to force a conclusion, but because understanding your shift window is like finding the entry point into the mystery. Alright, let's go. Let's start with the one everyone brings up first, 2012. Now, if you've never cared about the Mayan calendar stuff, you've heard the idea. The world was supposed to end in 2012, and it didn't. But people who take the Mandela Effect seriously ask a different question. What if it did end? And we continued in the nearest version where things almost matched. And look, I know how that sounds, I get it. But here's why 2012 sticks. Because a massive number of people don't just say Mandela effects showed up after 2012. They say something more interesting. They say, life hasn't felt the same since 2012. Not in a political way, not in a news cycle way. I mean in that quiet, personal way where you can't quite explain it. but you feel it. They'll describe it like time started sprinting, years started disappearing, people got colder, the world got sharper, less forgiving, like reality became more compressed. What's freaky is that you hear this from people who don't even know what the Mandela Effect is. They'll say things like, "I don't know what happened, but everything felt different after around 2012. That's a marker. Because Mandela effects by themselves are weird, but when the feeling of reality changes at the same time, that's something else. Now, does that mean 2012 was the exact moment? Not necessarily. But it could have been the point where the seam started showing, where the shift crossed the threshold and became noticeable. And if you felt that post-2012 acceleration, you already know why some people point to it. Now we move into the one people either love or hate talking about. CERN, the Large Hadron Collider. And I'm not going to sit here and do the cartoon version where CERN is some evil reality machine with a big red button. That's not how I roll. But I am going to say something simple. CERN's job is to study the structure of reality. Particle physics is literally about smashing matter apart to understand what everything is made of. So when people connect CERN to timeline shifts, they're really asking one question. If you're pushing the boundaries of physics, could you accidentally push the boundaries of reality? Even if you don't believe that's possible, you can still understand why the idea sticks. Because for a lot of people, the era where CERN became widely known lines up with the exact period where things started feeling unstable. And the way people describe it isn't "I forget stuff." It's more like, "I don't recognize the world the same way." And again, I'm not saying CERN is the cause. I'm saying it sits inside the same time zone as the shift reports, and that it's worth paying attention to. In investigations like this, you don't ignore repeated overlaps. If this is already triggering that something's wrong feeling, watch our original Mandela Effect episode, where we break down what the phenomenon is, theories around timeline shifts and parallel realities, and explore some surprising examples that caught us even off guard. And if you want something quicker, there's also 2 shorter videos that have 2 different versions of our top 15 Mandela effects. I'll link both of them below. This episode hits differently once you've seen them. Alright, let's keep going. Now, this one is huge, and honestly, it might be the most emotionally charged window of all. Because if you ask people when reality started feeling unfamiliar, when everything felt like it took a hard left turn, a ridiculous number of them say 2016. Sometimes 2015, maybe even sometimes 2017. But that stretch, it comes up constantly. And what people describe isn't just the world got different. They describe it like the world got replaced. Like culture became more hostile overnight. Like the internet turned poisonous. Like people stopped listening to each other and started performing. Like everything became exaggerated, polarized, tense, and somehow less real. And yeah, I already know what the skeptic response is. That's just modern life. But that's not what people are saying. They're not saying it evolved. They're saying it shifted. And when you combine that with the fact that Mandela Effect conversations exploded around this era, it's hard to ignore. It's like people suddenly started noticing the details, or worse, It's like the details started noticing them. Because once you see the Mandela Effect clearly, you start catching them everywhere, and it can genuinely mess with your head. So if someone who feels like 2016 was the change year, just know you're in one of the biggest groups. Alright, this one gets heavy, but we have to talk about it because it's a massive part of why people take the Mandela Effect personally. There's a theory that the shift wasn't global, it was individual. That some people's Mandela Effect started after a near-death moment. An accident, illness, something that should have ended them. And the idea is, they didn't make it in their original branch, but their consciousness continued in the nearest one where they survived. It's called quantum immortality, and I'm not telling you to blindly believe that, but I am telling you this. If you ever had a close call and afterward life felt different, and I don't mean emotionally different, I mean reality different, you understand why people go down this road. Because some people don't just notice brand changes, they notice their entire life feeling slightly off afterwards. Like the tone of reality changed, like things that used to feel stable became strange, like they're not exactly where they used to be. And if you've experienced that, this conversation hits completely different. It stops being a phenomenon, it becomes a personal marker. So here's where I'll tell you what I lean toward. I don't think it was one clean moment, one instant, one dramatic timeline snap. I think it was gradual, a slow merge, like two versions of reality started bleeding together. Because if timelines branch, which a lot of physicists argue is at least possible, there's no rule that says they stay separate forever. Branches could reconnect, overlap, or even merge. And if that happens, you'd get exactly what we're seeing. Most of reality still works, life continues, history mostly holds together. But certain details don't line up, because you're looking at a stitched reality, a blend, a patched version, like a file was copied, but some assets were replaced with near identical versions. That's what Mandela effects feel like. Not mistakes, leftovers. So here we are. We've got these main windows showing up again and again. 2012, the Large Hadron Collider era. 2016, and the personal near-death shift cases. And it leads to the real question, the one I want you to answer right now. Not when did it happen, but what caused it. Because if we can agree on the most likely cause, the whole phenomenon becomes more traceable. Alright, let's lock this in. I've got a poll question for you tonight. What do you think caused the timeline shift? Is it A, CERN and reality experiments? Or B, quantum immortality and near-death branching? Or is it C, simulation reset and a timeline patch? Or D, is it just a collective consciousness shift? I want you to jump in there, the poll's live, go and vote now. And in the comments, tell me more about your moment. Not your funniest example, not the most popular one. I mean the first Mandela effect that made you stop and go, that's not how I remember it. Because those first ones, those are the ones that usually hit the hardest. And if this episode hit you, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find these conversations, especially the ones quietly thinking something doesn't add up, but they've never actually had a place to talk about it. Here's my final word on this. The Mandela effect isn't a party trick. It isn't a meme. It isn't people being silly. It feels like a fracture line. And I don't think it's random. I think something happened. Maybe one event, maybe a chain of events, maybe something we don't fully understand, but I believe we crossed into a nearby version of reality. One that looks almost identical until you start checking the details. And once you notice the details, you can't unnotice them because the feeling doesn't leave. I'm Mike. Thanks for joining us on part 1 of a 7-part deep dive into the Mandela Effect. And if you can right now, stick around and watch another one of our stories. And as always, make sure you stay curious and share what you know with anyone that's happy to listen. We'll see you next time.